So welcome back for another episode of HXT 212. And today I'm actually very excited because I even took some notes because I didn't want to mess up the introduction. Today I have with me Delia Wieser, and most people expect Delia to tell them what's next, the next trend, the next big thing. But that's not what she does, and that's the interesting part actually, because Delia studies how change actually happens, how expectations are shaped, shifted, resetted. So she wrote Road Trip to Innovation. She wrote quite a few books, and I'm very super duper excited to talk about it. She co-authored Trend Driven Innovation. She gave even a TEDx talk on why we misunderstand change, which I watched at length. And she founded Mama Matters, a project focused on self-care for motherhood, built around the idea that when a baby is born, a mother is born too. Super duper interesting. So today we're not talking about trends. We are talking about clarity, about judgment, about how to see what actually matters. So my name is Thibaut Catala. I'm the founder of Catala Consulting, and this is HXT 212.
HXD 212.
Today, I feel that everything is quite noisy. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of trend, a lot of things. And what do you feel is actually currently quite loud right now? What feels loud right now in the world?
Wow, everything is so loud, right? Our lives are so chaotic. We get impulses from everywhere from the moment we wake up because our phones are next to our bed to when we go out and we're bombarded with impulses from ads and stuff that is happening and then online and then our normal lives. So the world is quite intense at the moment.
So you think like a noise from personalized to each other. We all have different type of noise, but do you think there is some big noise which are like everyone is focusing on, or like, you see what I mean? Like, yeah.
In
Good.
terms of noise, you mean the conversations that are currently being very loud in our society? Wow, yeah, I think the loudest is the one around AI
Okay.
and around the question of, is this fake or is this real? Wherever we read something or see something, right? We've kind of lost the ability to trust what we see, which is pretty scary. I think the conversation really moved from, is this authentic? We used to ask that question, like, is this authentic? And that was quite of an
Yeah.
emotional one. And we moved to the existential one, like, is this real? Right?
Like to start to ask ourselves is what are we seeing? Is it fake news, or is it like a real news? Is it AI? Is it not?
Yeah. Is this text written by AI? Is this picture made with AI? Is this track that I'm listening to on Spotify real, made by a person or not? And also very interesting, I think, where is the border and what is still human or partially human, and what's the roles of humans in all this interaction. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I think labeling things will be more and more needed in the future for us to build this trust, because this technology will not disappear. It will be there, embedded more and more in our lives, in the apps that we use, and how we go about our work life and personal life. So knowing that something is made, even if partially with AI, will be a big thing. And in China, they're already doing this. They're the nation that trusts AI the most. I think it's over 80% of people trust AI, whereas in Germany and closer to us is around 30%. And they made it a law to label AI in whatever it is that you're doing.
We see it more and more. You're right. Like a picture on social media. If it's they ask like, or even you have some labels that are coming automatically if the algorithm recognize if it's made by AI. So labeling, I think, is a big thing, and to differentiate between what is made by AI and what is made by human. yeah, I think the fine line is actually very, like in art, in music, the line now today is very, very thin. And sometimes we actually don't recognize that it's made by AI. Or I think like it's becoming smarter and smarter. And that's now hard to recognize like what is made by AI and what is not. Okay.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, so you talk about all those kind of yeah, like everything being a bit of noisy, like very loud around us, and you talk about AI, but are you saying that today what we you see you believe that some people believe that what we call today important is just noise, or do you think is really important?
Mm, what we call important in again in the conversations that we're having,
Yeah,
whether you mean if we're losing track of what is really
important.
important in our
Yes.
lives and what really matters,
Yes.
right?
Like for example, like AI could be
Yeah,
important for some people, but may not be important for everyone. So it can be loud as well.
definitely.
You see what I mean? I think that's
Yeah.
important.
Like covering things.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, to discover what is really important, what matters in our lives, we need to go back to those human basic needs, right? And the Maslow pyramid,
Okay.
that's where it all starts. And that's where it starts also with trends and innovation, actually, because, yeah, there are new products and services being launched every day, every second, almost, I think. But yeah, they don't change us fundamentally. They do change the
Yeah.
conversation, but what they actually do is they address our basic human needs in new and special ways. So it is all should be reduced to our need for connection, for safety, and then once you go towards the peak of the pyramid, you have creativity and self-improvement. And yeah, these needs actually don't change as fast or as fundamental as we sometimes feel, but they're just addressed in new and special ways. And to come back to your question of how do we make the difference between noise and what really matters, I think that's one way to do it, to really ask ourselves, does this really answer a human basic need? Or is it just, something new that will pass by? And the technology, even though it sounds super exciting at the beginning, still, if we deep dive,
Yeah.
it actually answers a human basic need. So
Okay.
if it doesn't, then it's gonna be the product or the service that is based on it will just disappear after a while. It will be interesting because everything that is new is hyped, as AI is now in our lives as well. And we're all trying to experiment and see where it really fits in our lives.
Yeah.
But what will stay is what matters, and what matters will be connected to our human basic needs.
That's very interesting. That's what I keep repeating. Like the human element
Yeah.
should be at the center of everything, and AI tech should be just an enabler to help us have more human connection, not to replace anything. And I think that's a very big differentiation from people what people believe, because people are scared of AI. People
Yeah.
are scared that they may lose a job because of AI or because of tech. But I don't think so. I think it should be amplifying
Yeah.
the human experience.
Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
agree with this?
Yeah, definitely. It should, not replace human
Yeah.
intelligence, but support human progress, whatever that is. And very interestingly, there are now a couple of new apps and services that are popping up that are blending, in my opinion, in a better way, humans with AI.
Such as, do you have some names?
Such as, yeah, one of the recent one, it is from the travel industry,
Okay.
is
The
an
best.
application called Boop, so Boop.
Boop.
Yeah.
It's for the kids. It's for kids. Okay. Boop.
For kids too.
Okay.
But it basically helps you create a new travel itinerary based on where your friends traveled.
Okay.
The platform is built with AI, so people would use AI to allow it to track their whereabouts when they travel to a different city. It would pin locations on the map. It would allow to select pictures that you took during your trip and organize it in a good looking way as a travel itinerary for other people who want to book it. And they would also partner with Booking.com, Expedia, and other platforms. So if you go in the app, you would be able to see human built itineraries
Yeah.
that you can actually book, but AI is
Supporting it.
supporting it. Yeah. Or yeah, other examples you have of I think it's really good to blend both. One of my favorite travel companies is Black Tomato.
Black tomato?
Yeah.
I know rotten tomatoes, but
Yeah.
I don't know black tomato. See, black tomato. I know black tomato. You're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
you're right. Yes, yes,
luxury
yes. Yeah.
travel platform, and they just launched a new way of discovering destinations based on emotions, because they say actually it's not about where you want to go, but it's about how you want to feel.
Super interesting.
Yeah,
Very
and
good.
they this platform is built with AI behind it. So when you go on their website, you would first talk about how you want to feel and have this AI supported kind of connections between
Yeah.
locations and emotions and so on. But it is trained not on things that are out there, but trained on Black Tomato's 20 years of data and
Yeah.
experience in
Yeah.
it. So again, it's AI just pushing a very human topic and
Super interesting.
emotions, right? So that's where when I love AI.
Definitely, again, this emotion, experience, human connection, that's most important at the end. And
Yeah.
yeah, super, super interesting. You mentioned about um, trends, new tech popping up every second as such,
Yeah.
new apps coming up like Boop. I just learned something, so thank you so much for sharing this. But I feel as well that you have a lot of people who are jumping on new trends very quickly. And I feel as well like you have some very, very smart people, very, very smart teams. And I feel that sometimes they still follow the wrong signals, the wrong noise, the wrong trend. Why is that? Why do you feel that those guys are just jumping on new trend and they are very smart, but they jump on the wrong thing at the wrong time? What do you think is a issue here, or what's happening
Well,
here?
it's very human, right?
Okay.
To do that.
Okay.
To get excited about things that are coming up and wanting to be part of it, because yeah, we all want to belong and be cool, so we're jumping on it because we find it cool. And yeah, I mean, I think with anything, if you do that at the beginning, you're learning with time as well, and you're seeing what matters and what doesn't matter that much. And there are many companies who are now just adding AI for the sake of AI, or adding any technology for the sake of technology. And I think they will just notice that after a while it doesn't work. It either doesn't attract the right audience, or if there isn't any human basic need that it addresses, it will disappear.
Very interesting. But it's not too late, or it won't be a bit of a waste of time, like if they focus on the wrong noise, the wrong trend.
Yeah, finding the right moment to apply something is truly important. And it can't be the same everywhere in the world, right? Context matters so much. So I think the key is to adapt what you're doing to your audience, and to the region where you are, and to the level of preparedness that people have around you.
Because you can be on the right trend, but not at the right time. Or you can be at the right time with the right trend, but not on the right context as well. Everything has
Yeah.
to align to be at the right time, at the
Yeah.
right moment. Yeah, no, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's part of innovation strategy workshops, and of course tracking trends
Yeah.
and insights, consumer insights on a constant basis, and this will give you the trust, and also actually things don't pop up out of a sudden, even though they seem like that for us.
yeah.
But if you track them early enough, they will not surprise you. So you will have, as a company, a better feeling about when is the right time to launch something.
Okay. Do you, because I know that's also your job to find those trends before they are called trend even.
Yeah.
And do you still get surprised about new trends, or do you still you see them happening like long before they are called trends or like before they are buzzy? Like, do you have any example? Like, I know AI is a big thing. When did you see AI that was coming to be a big thing? Or any trend like you saw happening like a few years ago and now you say, okay, now I know why it's so popular.
Yes, you do see them early enough.
Yeah.
So, future is actually not something that happens
Okay.
all of a sudden to you. It's something that you can track, but also something you can also build with your own actions and reactions to what is happening. And it all starts with human basic needs, and then these human basic needs ripple in culture. So, from people to culture to products and services, and then to society. And like I always give a very old example, but I like to give it because it's easy to understand how trends work and how to track them. The Impossible Cheeseburger was the very first vegan burger ever. Years ago in the US, it was launched, and people were going crazy because it looked like a real burger. It tasted like a real burger, but it was entirely made of plants. And it was the first time we could say that we're eating something guilt-free as well. So
Yeah.
you indulge yourself into the pleasure of eating a good burger, but you don't feel guilty about harming the environment because you're not eating meat. And then this guilt-free idea, we saw it then popping up in other industries as well. So we saw it in fashion. You have several brands that are using or making textile of materials that are growing very fast, like eucalyptus, or even made of fruit fibers, like the leaves from pineapples. And that's also a guilt-free consumption idea, right? You feel better about buying a t-shirt that is made of a fiber that is growing fast and not harming the environment. And then you would see applications like Light Flight was giving you examples of how you could travel in a more sustainable way. So if you still had to travel fast and far away and take the plane, it will give you the best connection. So after seeing this expectation of consuming guilt-free, you can say, there's something happening there. So it's about guilt-free consumption, and then you give it a fancy name, and there you go, you have a trend. But the idea is that you spot this expectation early enough, and then you tweak it to your context, and you can create a new product or service, or even a whole strategy and vision for your company based on that. So you don't literally look at isolated things like TikTok and where is that happening, but you look at the bigger picture. So what kind of need does that answer, and what is the expectations? And we can do this exercise together if you want now with TikTok.
Super interested.
So what do you think TikTok would be? What kind of basic need would answer, right? It would also be connection, definitely one, because that's community.
Communication.
Yeah.
Education a bit.
Yeah.
Maybe?
Yeah, there are many people who are just there to learn more things, and it's a powerful source for that.
It's kind of tribe, like people who are using TikTok, they recognize themselves as a TikToker. So it can be a tribe and a community around it.
Yeah. And then the expectation is learning it fast, quick content. You have quick, you feel rewarded very quickly, right? So your attention span doesn't. It's very short, and it's exactly. You're on dopamine, like you instantly learn something new. So instant learning. Okay, maybe that's something interesting there. If I'm I don't know, a travel company, let's say, what can I take from that instant learning? How does that look like for my guests, maybe in my hotel? How can I cater to that expectation, even if it's a totally different industry? And I would say maybe TikTok has nothing to do with me. It's hard these days, but but let's force it and say, why should I care about it? Well, it's because of that. So instant learning. How do I embed it into my services? What does it mean for my concierge service in the hotel, for example? So that's how it would work. So everything matters, actually.
But you okay. I'm fascinated. That's why I'm not. I'm very silent because I'm listening. I'm super fascinated by what you just mentioned. So I was just like a student listening to you. But yeah, so it's more about like finding the needs that this new expectation, this new trend is filling up, and then trying to apply this kind of new expectation, new behavior to a different industry or to a different yeah company.
Exactly. And that's how you can make sure that you are really not off with what you're creating, because it's something that is grounded in what matters for people.
that's that's super interesting.
Easy, right?
It seems you
Seems
seems
easy.
yeah you say it like it's very easy, but I still believe like people are still jumping sometime on the wrong signals, and that's also why we have this discussion today. But and also like you talk about spotting those expectations, spotting those new trends or those new things like signals which are popping up. But did you find out that sometimes the more information you have, it doesn't mean that you take better decision? When did you realize this?
That the more information you have,
It doesn't mean that you're going to take the right decision. It's just like going to be like too much information, too much noise, so your decision will be a bit unclear, a bit blurred. So you see what I mean? Did you realize that, or actually maybe I'm wrong, maybe like the more information the better, but what do you feel about it? Like the more information the better, or the right information the right time is better?
well, for me as a trend researcher, at the beginning of every process, I try to look everywhere.
Okay.
Basically, if you imagine a mirror board where you just gather all the pictures, all the links, all the signals that you're seeing around, and then you try to spot patterns. And that's when you decide, and it's very important to decide also what you discard, right? I think that's a very, yeah, context based decision all the time. And it's definitely something that you need to do.
Yeah, because you're right on the. So now we're talking about big innovation or new trends, but I'm taking this example a bit more local in a hotel, for example.
Yeah.
In a hotel, a GM or leadership team, we still see a lot of data popping up every day,
Yeah.
and sometimes I feel that we have a lot of data, but the decision are maybe not the right decision that we're taking based on the data we have, or the energy that we are focusing our attention on is not spent on the right thing. You see what I mean? So again, here in this situation for hotel manager, do you believe we should have a lot more data to make sure we find those kind of new signals to be able to focus on the right thing, or we should have like only a few key metrics to track to make sure we only focus on those one? What's your recommendation? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to decide
Yeah.
at the beginning what are your key metrics and narrow down definitely, because otherwise it becomes too chaotic and too
Yeah.
big to handle. And I think the key is also to combine different research methods, because data is good, but it's not good to focus only on data, right? It's good to combine it with consumer trends, with looking at these expectations as well. And sometimes it's maybe good to just do market research, right? And sometimes it's great to do, I don't know, follow up or interviews with some of your guests. So I think the idea is to, yeah, have a feeling of how what gives you more true information,
Like a researcher.
like a true researcher.
Everyone should be a researcher at some point.
Yeah,
Like, even if
definitely.
as a leader you should be a researcher. You should look at
Absolutely.
a lot of people don't talk to the guests or don't talk to the customers. They believe like they will get information on reviews or like online and so on.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're a bit scared to talk to guests or to
Yeah.
talk to customers.
Yeah.
So you say like they should put their hat of researcher and do their own research, like first-hand research, to make sure they understand what's going on, like new expectations and so on. So yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. So from what I understand, are you saying that innovation is not broken, but our relationship to innovation is?
Whew, another hard one.
It's becoming a bit more philosophical.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. No, innovation cannot be broken. We don't allow it to be broken.
Okay.
It's still something that brings us a lot of good things in our lives and improves our lives in a lot of ways. And we should not forget about that. But indeed, to your point before, it should be done at the right time. And the only thing that we need to do is to think about the human basic needs and the expectations, and to go about the world looking at that, double checking, and if it works, then that's the right moment to do it.
So you encourage people to experiment and maybe don't go, correct me if I'm wrong, don't go all in on a new idea or new trend, but more have this kind of like the lean startup approach, when
Step by
you
step.
step by step, you just do a small experience, you see if it stick, and then you develop, and then you go in, but
Yeah.
experiment and don't be afraid of
Absolutely. I
taking
mean, you
risk.
can start with a marketing campaign that has very little resources, needs very little resources to execute, and you can see how people are reacting to that. One comes to my mind is a loungewear brand in the US called Aerie, and they launched a campaign on Instagram where they talked about the fact that they're using only real models, so no AI faces, no, just real bodies,
Yeah.
right? And real humans. And it skyrocketed their engagement. And this shows that there is a need for that. And this is a powerful signal for them to also do more around this idea. So you can test a lot with very little resources at the beginning, I think, yes.
To test, to learn, to develop, or to stop and continue. That's the
Yeah.
key. And for everything, if you have a new startup, if you have a new idea, instead of launching the full idea and building the full product, just to launch some campaign to see if it resonates already with your
Yeah.
market. That's already some early signals.
Yeah.
And then step by step building on this. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
But it's hard to do, especially if it's your idea, because you fall in love with it
Yeah.
and you want it to be finished out there. And
But that's a risk as well. That's
yeah,
not, people told me like
definitely.
from day one as an entrepreneur, they told me like, don't fall in love with your idea,
Yeah,
because that's
exactly.
where you crash. That's where you crash.
Yeah.
They say like, don't fall in love, because you start here and then you will need to pivot. And if you are too in love with the idea, you won't pivot when it's needed.
Absolutely. It's gonna change many, many times until it's achieved this so-called market
fit.
fit. But yeah, you have to be aware that you just have to really set out there and get very early on feedback, again, the interviews as well, and yeah, take it from there.
No, I think that's a key a key practice for any entrepreneur, any student, any project. Yeah, just to be out there, have the courage to take a risk, experiment, see what's going on, learn, and then pivot if you know, like like there's a scene in Friends where they're moving do you watch Friends?
Yeah.
Yeah, when they move out with a big sofa, they're like
Yeah.
pivot, 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 and I think that's a key thing that needs to come back in entrepreneurship, when you need to pivot very quickly. If not, the sofa fall off, and you crash.
Yeah.
And so I've
like
I've,
that.
I've ordered your book on the what was the one I've ordered, the one on innovation.
Yeah.
The
Trend-driven innovation.
Yes, I've
Yeah.
ordered this one. Unfortunately, it didn't come today,
Oh.
but I've read already some chapter on it online. And in the book, there's a point which I already took from the book, which was yeah, I find it counterintuitive, like very interesting on this point. You said like, to understand what people will want next, you shouldn't look at the customers, you should look at the businesses already resetting expectation. Can you tell me a bit more about this idea, and how can leaders actually apply this way of thinking in practice?
Yeah, it's actually what we were talking about earlier, right? In also in our conversation now, to discover things, we talked about expectations and basic needs and gave examples of different companies, services,
Yeah.
and we asked ourselves those questions. And this is what it is about, because if you're gonna ask consumers what they want, you're probably gonna get a totally different answer, not because they want to lie to you, but because they don't realize themselves. And if you want to be an innovator, then it's good to be there creating, even creating expectations and not answering the ones that are existing. So the way you can do that is to really look at those businesses, products, services, and marketing campaigns also that people are really, lavishing their attention on, and they're talking about it everywhere and why. And actually, we're all, or we can all be trend researchers. We just need to have this mindset and read articles and Instagram posts, really wondering ourselves, that's interesting. Why? Why do
So
people say that?
that's your main. So what would you recommend for people that want to get into this kind of research, or like to find those kind of signal by themselves? You say like articles,
Yeah.
social media, anything else?
Yeah, just have to walk around being curious, no matter where you are. It can also happen on the street that you see a new shop or a product in a store, and it raises your curiosity in a certain way, and then you can ask yourself, why actually does this exist, and why do people need it? And
Do you have any
yeah.
best practices? Should people like walk with a small pen and paper and write everything they find curious? Is
Oh,
anything?
yeah, that's probably how I used to do it
Yeah.
when I started in this industry
Okay.
like 20 years ago. But I guess the youngsters today just use their mobile phones to take a picture and organize it
There you go.
differently in a very digital way. But yeah, these days you find trend reports everywhere also. If you're bombarded with them, there's
Yeah.
a lot of free content out there. And of course, now because of AI or thanks to AI, there's a lot more out there, and more noise as well. So you got to be paying attention also to kind of dissect and take what is relevant for you. But yeah, as a trend researcher, you can start already reading what is out there available for free, and then, as I outlined earlier, the make a board, put all the signals that you're interested in, and then try to spot a pattern. And that's how
So
you spot trends.
yeah, that's super interesting. And do you have any rule of thumb that you have that people can take away from this?
One of them is make sure it's really new.
Okay.
I'm looking at things that happen in the past 3 to 6 months and tracking them. Then a trend is always an evolution of something. So trends actually don't completely disappear, they just become something else. Another one is that from the moment you spot them to the moment where they are fully adopted by the masses is quite long.
Okay.
So sometimes, even if for us as trend researchers, some trends feel old, they're actually not old. They're just happening then after 2 years or three after you
Yeah.
spotted them. So be patient with that. And then make sure that the idea you spotted was visible in different industries and also different regions, because that's when it becomes clear that it is a global trend and not something that is happening in your local community, even though that is important too for your projects and for your company if you are based somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, like I have so many ideas, so I'm going to
Are
get
you gonna be a trend researcher
I,
now?
I love, but we should all be trend researchers as such. Like I do believe even like in a corporate environment, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, even more, we should all be trend researcher because we need to constantly evolve with the new expectation, the new customer needs, the customer behavior, and if we don't evolve, that's where we start to lose market share, and that's where we start to fall a bit behind. And yeah, I think that we should all be innovator in a way. That's my
Yeah.
takeaway from this
Yeah.
already.
We can all be innovators these days. We
Yeah.
have all the tools at hand.
No, I think that's great, and I spot something as well from your TED talk
Yeah.
in Bucharest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you once said the only thing that really changed is our expectation,
Mm-hmm.
not people, not needs, but expectation.
Yeah.
And when you look at the world today, why do you see expectation shifting faster than organization realize?
I think it's hard to answer because it always really depends on the company itself and how well they track things and how what kind of processes they have internally.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to generalize.
It's
I,
a hard
I can't
one.
do that.
Yeah, I see that you are. But okay,
I
so
give them credit. I give people credit for their
yeah, you're
work. So
nice. You're
I don't want to point my finger at them.
You should. You know, this podcast is all about being rebel and finding those kind of gap. So here we go. That's your opportunity. Throw them under the bus. But no, but I can give you an example from an outsider. I'm not innovator yet. I found the law and government are much behind compared to the world of tech and AI, for example. And I found there's a big gap.
Absolutely.
That's one, for example, where I
Yeah.
see the expectation are shifting much faster than what the government and the law are being made of.
Yeah.
For me, that's the biggest one right now. That's an
That's
example.
true, yeah. And also to add to that, people are trusting brands more than governments still. So there was every year there's a Edelman Trust Barometer, it's something that I look at. And again this year, it was shown that people trust brands more than governments.
Is this
And
good or bad?
it puts a lot of pressure on brands
Yeah.
to perform. Um, I think governments need to up their game. I think that's what it means, right?
There you go. If you talk to government, what should they do? Hi, government. Here we go. So what should I do?
Oh, whoa, that's a long one.
I
It
will,
goes
I,
back
I
to
will, I will, I
values
will, I will I will
again.
vote for
Where
you.
do we start?
I will vote for you if you present yourself on the presidential
Oh,
election if
no,
you
no,
want.
no. I'm not at all that type.
So what can they do to step up the game here?
Oh, I think, again, to pay more attention to communities and how what is important also in society today. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, I have a brand to support mothers,
Yeah.
and motherhood is an overlooked topic by governments in other countries than in Austria. I would say it's okay here, but it can be done much more. For example, to support mothers in and future generations, right? But from a financial point of view, it's pretty hard. As a mother, you have to juggle many things, and you're almost sometimes punished for the fact that you need to stay at home and take care of your kid, and that shouldn't be like that. So I think one way is just to pay attention to the things that matter that will impact future generations, and motherhood is a big one.
For me, the key takeaway here is as well to recommend to any company, government, to be more innovator as such, and to talk to customer, um, to talk to everyone what they need and what they want, and to see that to adjust as well the approach to the new expectation. That's so like so again, everyone needs to be
Yeah.
innovator in a way. Big
Yeah.
from the government, potentially a bit less self-interest and less looking at what really matters, the values, and what moves the needle in the society forward.
Yeah, and work more decentralized, because it's always hard when it's this
Decentralize.
big system that needs to work somehow.
Do you
But yeah,
believe?
I mean, like, I don't
Yeah.
know how this would work out. Like, if I would, then
That's okay. Now it's more like a self-interest because I had like thousands of discussion on this. Do you see decentralization as a signal?
yeah, definitely. we see it in many things, right? That
Such as,
so financials
yeah.
are like with crypto and everything that is happening there.
So do you think it's a real trend, real signal, or is it just noise?
It mm.
Mm.
The difference between a noise and a signal is only what you make of it.
Okay.
I think something that is noise for one industry or for one company can be a signal for another, right? You just have to decide. And that's the art.
Excellent. Okay. That's a very good precision that you have on the noise. I had okay. Noise, expectation, signals, trends. It seems all of this seems all the same for me. But you're totally right. It should be like a clear line between and what you make out of it. Super interesting. Yeah. And we talk about the culture as well. That's something we talked about before. But where do you think culture show up in decision people think that are rational? You think culture should have more importance in our decision making process as innovator or as company leaders?
Yeah, definitely. It does actually, because yeah, that's where it all starts. So all the signals are being picked up first from humans to culture and then to products and services. So there's no way around it. And culture, I say broadly,
Yeah.
popular culture, but of course you include also value systems in it
Yes.
and context. There's no way around it. Yeah.
So we should all focus on the right values, creating the right culture before anything else. That should be the fundamentals.
I think that in a way that is already there and it's
Okay.
happening and it's bubbling.
Okay.
The idea for a company is, I think, more to be able to read those signs and read those bubbles early enough. Like you have, and I'm now working together often with Carla Moss, who is a semiotician, and I've learned a lot from her, looking at culture in a very different way, and it can sound like look into the future of snacks, for example, right? How do we do that? Well, you first look at culture. What is happening there around food and nutrition and eating behavior? You go back to TikTok and you see all these I even forgot how it's called now. There was this trend for ladies where you could the tapas dinner or something, where the idea was that every evening you should just eat a little bit, and it's just a few things on your plate, and it was a big thing, and that changes also nutrition and how we perceive food and snacks. And then you have everything that is happening around fitness and sports that is adding to that. Then you have the whole Ozempic and
Yes.
GLP-1 elements of it. They also come actually from culture,
Yeah.
and they impact very deep and very wide. Like you see now in New York, people are kind of, I mean, their space is scarce there, but they don't have living rooms anymore
Okay.
because or actually they don't have living rooms where you have a dinner table where you sit and eat, because food has become, or eating has become very different. You just quickly snack something,
Okay.
and that also changes our society as well. And right, there's so much that happens at the dinner table beyond just food.
Connection.
Yeah. So that's why I think culture has always it's always where things are starting, and it has a lot of impact on everything that we do, how we live our lives, how we consume.
There is this saying that I hear a lot. A lot of people, and I think that's across different generation. They are saying like it was better before. Do you think it was really better before, or not?
I think we will all say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My parents said so. This
Yeah.
my grandparents said the same.
Yeah.
And I feel the
This
same
happened to
with
you
TikTok,
too?
with
Yeah.
Fortnite, and so on. So do you think it's a normal thing?
Yeah, I think it's totally normal. And but things are also happening and developing a lot faster today.
Yeah.
So for humans, it's gonna be probably more and more difficult to keep up.
Yeah.
That's why for every trend, there's actually also a counter trend.
Okay.
So one is, yeah, being or wanting to keep up with things and knowing about everything that is out there. But the other side of the coin is that we are all searching for silence.
Like
And
AI and people who are looking for
yeah,
not have any AI and just grow the carrot and potatoes in the garden.
yeah, and just on purpose being offline and yeah, they're also to keep coming back to travel. There's something called the map of quietude
The
in
map of quietude.
yeah,
Okay.
in south of Sweden. They measure the noise of different locations and they tell you which one is the most silent one. So you pick the place you want to travel to based on the level
Silence.
of silence that is there.
Very good. So it's again going back to the feeling and how you want to be and okay.
Yeah, everything goes back to that.
Yeah, and to go back to the it was better before trend, or it's not. It's just like a shift. Did you see this movie? No Countries for Old Men.
Yeah,
It's
but I'm
old
not
man.
good with movies.
Okay, very good.
I'm not gonna remember the part that you tell me.
No, but it's
I
good for you.
forget that, like I'm watching them, but then they're gone, so I
No,
can't
but this one
remember.
is good for you, I think, like, because the No Countries for Old Men, if I understood it correctly, it's about the people saying like, oh, it was better before, but it's not that it was better before. It's just that there's a new generation that are doing things differently,
Yeah,
and we are
exactly.
getting older. So it's not
Yeah,
like you are getting older, and that's why you believe it was better before.
yeah,
But it's just not better or worse. It's just different.
different.
Correct. So we are getting older. I mean, I'm getting older. You're not getting older. I'm getting older, and the new generation are doing things differently. So it's just a shift happening, and I think that's important as a mindset as well to remember to remind ourselves that it's not better or worse. It's just different, and we need to embrace this kind of change, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm going to send you the movie. And this one is more like I'm very this one is a self-interest question, so I apologize for this. From a non-hotelier perspective, where do you believe the hospitality industry is heading to?
Wow, big one. We're gonna do a project one day on that, right?
Definitely.
Gonna give you more time to
Yes.
research and go deeper. Wow, yeah. Well, why do we travel? We travel to experience things, to connect with different cultures as well.
Yeah.
So I've seen the so-called slow travel is now quite popular as well. I've seen luxury companies owning trains and offering these amazing experiences where the journey is literally more than the destination.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, coming back to, as always, the basic needs is connecting or tapping into connection and unique experiences is still what will make a difference for people. And then, yeah,
Human connection. Definitely. The human connection. And the hospitality industry is all about connecting to people, as you mentioned, making sure we staff focus on the guest, and the guest as well experience the local environment. You want to go somewhere to feel something. You want to go somewhere to. People are saying like hotel should be a home away from home, but I disagree with this. I think like if you're traveling, it's because you want to get away from home. You want to
right.
have new connections, new experiences, and that's what I believe should be. And technology and AI will help to support this and to event amplify this, not to replace. But the human connection, the human element should be at the center of everything. That's my opinion.
Definitely. Yeah, they call it awe, right? It's
Yeah.
this beautiful emotion to be in awe about
Yeah.
what you're experiencing. And I saw many offers from hospitality, from travel companies
Yeah.
that are organizing tours around stargazing or looking at the solar eclipse in the
Yeah.
best place in the world, or sometimes not even knowing where you're going, which is a big one, like all these mystery tours, but just knowing how you want to feel.
And that you are seeing maybe at an early stage that you believe would be the next big thing.
I will pick one that I really like,
Yeah,
right? I don't know if it's going to be the next big thing. We never know. I really like this whole idea of AI and humans living in harmony together.
Yeah.
And I love the human premium. So when things can be or should be unmistakably human, and I think from the whole beginning of the story with AI, because I'm pretty sure we're just at the beginning of it, we're seeing that people are wanting to connect more and wanting to have things that are made by other people. And I think that's beautiful that technology actually this time really brings us maybe closer together and shows us what really matters. Like when digital technologies popped up, we thought we're not going to use paper anymore, and yet this is now premium. So this is what I'm looking at, and this is what I'm watching, like how humans become premium in this story.
I love this new signals, this new trend. But no, thank you 1,000 times, even not more, for being here, for discussing with me today. I've learned so much, so I'm actually very happy with this. And but if I had to recap as well, I believe clarity is not about knowing more; it's about seeing better. It's about looking at those kind of expectation, new guest behavior, new expectation, as you correctly said, and choosing what actually matters, to removing the noise, differentiating between the signals and what is noise as well. So that's very important. But I think we should all be a bit more innovator, a bit more researcher. So my key takeaway from today is that I'm going to embrace and have more often my hat of researcher, of innovator, and I believe everyone listening today should be more innovator in their day to day. So yeah, thanks so much, Delia, for joining me today. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Excellent. But thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next time on an episode of HXT 212.